No one saw my pain. I laughed loud. I worshiped louder, because if I ever let the truth show from behind the wall, if I ever unmuted the ache, I feared that the whole world would hear me break. But God was watching even in the silence.
Welcome, Royal One, to audacity to rule. The unmuted awakening. This is where silence ends and sovereignty begins. Where power is remembered, identity is restored, and your voice becomes your crown. I'm your host, Queen Chi, and this is your summons to rise, rule, and roll. Unmuted, let's begin.
There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It's the kind that comes from pain, the kind you learn to live inside. For years, I lived in that silence, smiling in public and bleeding in private, and yet somehow still believing God could bring beauty from all of it. I remember the years I lost life before it ever began, the miscarriages that felt like funerals for dreams no one else had met, and even in those sacred, vulnerable moments when I should have been covered, I was met with a disconnect that cut so much deeper than the losses themselves. It was like he was sorry in the moment for me, but he couldn't show up because he was disconnected himself, and he was unsure of even how to console me. And although it seemed cruel and unthoughtful, he just was simply lost in his own pain. But the result of it was the same. I felt utterly alone in mine. And when I actually got pregnant with my firstborn son, I remember being asked, "Why are you telling people you're pregnant? When you lose it, you'll just look stupid again." Those words cut me open like the sharpest scalpel dipped in poison. Those words replayed in my head every time I tried to hold hope again, every time I prayed again, every time I placed my hand on my belly and I whispered to new life I had yet to see. And though he didn't realize it at the time, that sentence buried something inside of me. It buried the safe space that believed in miracles out loud. For 5 months of pregnancy with my firstborn son, there was no real interest, no excitement shown, at least not until we found out the sex. And when I carried my lastborn son, the doctor put me on bed rest for 30 days because not only was I considered geriatric, pregnancy at 30, I was also hemorrhaging in my uterus. But bed rest was really only existed on paper, because in my home there was no preparation for me to rest. There was no meals prepared, there was no comfort given, there was no cares given. It was really the women at my church who showed up. They brought me food, they prayed for me, they prayed for my family. And it was in that moment that I realized then that sometimes your covering doesn't come from those who you expected. It comes from those who heaven assigns. After my first 2 sons were born, my silence, the internal shrinking, compartmentalizing of behaviors I could not control continued to grow. A wall of emotions, mental safety erected, and it grew bigger and stronger. And when he would call it babysitting, I called it mothering alone while married. Because even when I was exhausted from working, from leading, from ministry, he wouldn't watch these kids, even though he was sitting right at home. So I learned to carry them everywhere, to pack the diaper bags, the dreams, the prayers, and keep going with a smile so radiant, y'all, that no one saw my pain. I laughed loud. I worshiped louder, because if I ever let the truth show from behind the wall, if I ever unmuted the ache, I feared that the whole world would hear me break. But God was watching even in the silence. He saw me singing through tears, praying while bleeding, building while breaking. He saw every sacrifice, every seed, every sleepless night where I held both my babies and my breath. And it was there, in those lonely motherhood moments, that hidden heartbreak, that dominion started to form. It was not applause. It was not from validation, but from the quiet decision to just keep going. Not because I was strong, y'all, but because greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. Royal ones, listen. When God is in it, your silence is not surrender, it is strategy. Your tears are not weakness, they are a baptism. And the throne that you're called to sit on, it is built from the very season you thought buried you. Because remember that a seed has to be buried to grow. I didn't realize it then. But I wasn't losing. I was being formed in fire, formed in faith, formed in the kind of resilience that only heaven can measure. And now, when I speak, I don't speak as a woman who survived. I speak as a queen who rules what once tried to ruin her. Royal one, maybe you have been there too, smiling while surviving, carrying the weight of family, faith, and function while wondering who will ever carry you. Maybe your silence isn't weakness at all. Maybe it's the soil where your power is growing roots. Because sometimes God lets you walk through the wilderness not to punish you, but to prove you. Sometimes the isolation is an initiation preparing you to rule what others can't even carry. You're not disqualified by your disappointments. You are defined by your endurance. I am living proof that what tried to silence you cannot stop what God crowned inside of you. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode of The Awakening. If this episode stirred you, share it with somebody who's been silent for too long. Leave your review. I want to hear from you. Subscribe and keep journeying with me, because this is not just about my awakening, it's ours. This is the audacity to rule, the unmuted awakening, and your awakening continues the moment you decide to unmute.